Sunshines! I just got back from a crazy whirlwind trip with my sister, driving her across the country to move to Florida. Ding. Kimberly and Mallory take an epic road trip across the country and meet with friends along the way to move Kimberly to Florida to work for Disney World and the Mouse and the most magical place on earth. Alright, so we started off in Washington, obviously, because that's where we live, or at least where Kimmy lived. My mom came and picked me up at about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I went over to their house where Kimberly's bug was starting to be packed to the gills with everything she was taking with her. And I mean everything, because if it didn't fit in her bug, if any of you know my sister, it was out. We have some cute, charming pictures of us by the bug, with our mom, getting ready to go. Pretty exciting stuff, right? Before we knew it, we were off and at 'em. We're in the car. We're driving. So we started out at about 10:30 this morning, and we are right now driving through Ellensburg, Spokane, Western Washington, on our way to Eastern Washington, is totally what I meant, thank you, Kimmy, to Idaho, and then on to Montana. We're hoping that today we can get all the way to Montana. Kimmy's car is packed to the gills. Look at this. There's little Winnie the Pooh and Duffy over there, and just stuff is everywhere. But we're having fun. Yes. Yes. Learning all about the park. She's telling me everything she knows. The next state up on our ginormous adventure was Idaho. I don't really remember the entire transition, but what I do remember is in the very first day we got through Washington, through Idaho, and into Montana. We were driving through Missoula, Montana around dinner time, and I just happened to text our friend Michael Aranda, who just happened to be at dinner with a couple of his friends, and invited us to come along. Our goal for day one was to make it into Wyoming. Unfortunately, we did not. We ended up stopping for the night at a hotel in Billings, Montana. Sun rose on day 2, and we were up and at 'em bright and early. So right now we are driving away from Billings, Montana. We got into Montana yesterday way earlier than it felt like, because, I don't know, Montana's a huge state. It took forever. We're not even out of it yet. It's still taking forever. We went to not Vietnamese, it was a Mongolian grill type place called Hoo Hot, and it was fun. We met up with our friend Michael Aranda and his friend Stefan and Kaylin. It was lovely to meet them, and they were wonderful and sweet. So that was good because it made us eat dinner, and we finally rolled into our hotel. Don't tell my mom, at about 3 a.m. In case you haven't seen it, Montana looks like this, and it keeps looking like this for like ever. Montana is beautiful, but it's a little monotonous. Yes. I think we're gonna try to hit someplace in South Dakota. We'll probably call it a day or a night or whatever. We're hoping to get a good amount of drive time in today, probably about 12 hours or so, since we started at about 9:40, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. Shortly after that morning had commenced, we ended up in Wyoming with a goal to make it to South Dakota and Mount Rushmore by early afternoon. Driving through the Midwest was crazy, but we did make it to South Dakota by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, saw Mount Rushmore, and it was so cool. I had goosebumps. It was so amazing. Like, driving up the hill and seeing George Washington's face in the stone was incredible. Check it out! We're at Mount Rushmore! Those are the presidents! And it's huge and it's crazy! We took our time, we enjoyed it a little bit, and because we were on a time constraint, we did hurry right out of South Dakota. Now what Kimmy and I didn't realize is that that rain that we met in South Dakota was actually the sign of worse things to come. As we drove throughout the evening and I was struggling to find a place for us to stay that night, ideally at our goal, which at that point was Minnesota, I didn't realize that the storm was as bad as some of our friends were warning us of. They sent us a few texts throughout the day of, be careful of the weather, be careful of the weather, be careful of the storm, and I didn't really think much of it because honestly I thought we were going to be out of South Dakota long before anything happened. Well, I was wrong. And listening to the radio that Kimberly had thankfully turned on, the storm was getting worse and worse. We were driving on I-90 East and the storm was coming to meet us. There were actually 3 storms. One storm that had a tornado in it. one storm that had 60-mile-an-hour winds, rain, and lightning, and one storm that had hail the size of tennis balls. According to the lovely man on the radio who was intermittently cutting out because of said storms, they were all coming to converge over I-90. Even though I had managed to get us a hotel room in Minnesota for the night, we were now completely blocked off from getting to Minnesota. We realized that the storm was moving towards us and we were not about that life. So, after collecting ourselves, we decided to do what I imagine anyone in our position would do who had an end goal of getting somewhere in a certain amount of days. We decided to keep driving. And instead of going over to go down to Florida, we went down to go over. We all in all avoided Kansas because I was adamant that it was too ironic to escape a tornado into Kansas. So we found ourselves in Nebraska. Driving through the night, there were a few hours that I got very sleepy, and I was the driver at that point since driving in lightning was not Kimmy's favorite thing to do, and I don't blame her. It is terrifying. We were following a humongous semi who did not have a load, but seemed to also be taking the same trek we were because we followed him for hours and hours and hours, and he was on a mission. Finally, when all seemed like the storm had been a distant thing in our past, we ended up stopping to get some Red Bull at about 3 in the morning at a Walmart somewhere in Nebraska. Since we were totally on a mission at this point, awake on adrenaline and stress and just adrenaline, we just kept driving. And we drove through Nebraska, we drove through Iowa, we drove through Missouri, and we ended up in the late afternoon in Illinois. This is all day 2 because we didn't sleep. We just did not sleep. Sorry, Mom. In Illinois, we met up with Kimberly's longtime friend, Aaron, who is a sweetheart and so much taller in real life. He brought us ski, which is a drink, like not totally soda-y, but sort of like lemonade, but sort of like not, and made in Illinois, so that was delicious. And after having a short lunch, we were on to Kentucky because our goal was make it to Georgia by that night. We drove through Kentucky, we drove through Tennessee, and we actually ended up making it to Georgia by about midnight, 11 o'clock or so at night. And we had a hotel reserved in Georgia thanks to Kimberly's diligence, and our friend Colson came to spend the night and hang out with us. Having made it to Georgia on technically the eve of our 3rd night, though we didn't stop in between on our 2nd night, we felt really good about sleeping in and getting breakfast with Colson the next day because we only had a mere 9-hour drive from where we were in Georgia to Florida. So that was great. So we ended up sleeping in a little bit, thankfully not past checkout time, and we had our first Waffle House, or my first Waffle House experience with Colson for breakfast. All in all, a good time was had by all. It was super great, and by early morning, around 11 o'clock-ish, 12 o'clock-ish afternoon, we were off again with our sights set on Florida. So right now we are driving through Georgia. Yay! I'm having to talk quietly because Kimmy is currently sleeping. Oh, how precious. We should be at Kimmy's apartment by about 7:30 this evening, sans P stops. People drive like crazy people, that is for certain. There are definitely impatient, speeding, and I mean speeding, crazy drivers here in Georgia. Mostly in Atlanta, but sort of just in all of Georgia. I am clumping you into a group, so how very Washingtonian of me. Needless to say, we did make it to Florida by about 8 o'clock, 8:30-ish at night, possibly closer to 9, and Kimberly's now super sweet and awesome roommate, Carrie, had been waiting for us all day long. It was super great. We got there, the 3 of us unloaded Kimmy's car actually really quickly because she didn't really have that much stuff, and we drove off to go get our youngest sister, Becca, and go to dinner as one big happy family. Throughout that crazy trip, Kimberly and I actually touched down in 13 states in our cross-country trek, and it was super exciting and super fun. It was a super exciting trip that I wouldn't trade for anything. That time that I got to spend with my sister was so special to me. And I don't want to cry, so I won't talk about it too much more, but I'm so proud of her for being there and I'm so honored that she wanted me to be a part of that journey with her. Bye everyone.